The first thing is I think it's got a really good interface, so it's really user-friendly to use, and the fact that there are multiple views of different ways of looking at the data, and then it's very easy to get a snapshot immediately if there are issues. And so I've used it at the moment from an issues perspective. So with my master's group, I used it quite early on. I'm still using it now to check where people are at in terms of their ongoing participation and their participation in particular things. I'm not so much interested at this point in how many times they've accessed resources. In saying that, when it comes time to evaluate the course, I'll be taking a good look at that in terms of what material I've put up and how useful it is, or how many times, because within this course they have quite a bit of choice of the things that they can access. So I think I'll use it to review them. And the other thing is, this is a whole year course, so I'm only a quarter of the way through it, but it's already been interesting just to see where the peaks are. So in terms of when all of a sudden there's a massive spike in participation and when it drops off, and thinking about that in relation to what I'm doing in the course. But one particular way I used it was, there was a student who I intuitively thought was not very visible, and that's through my participation in the forums. It was really easy to go through, and then I identified it actually was an issue, and had the student had started off well but then seemed to have drawn back, and I actually ended up meeting with that student in person and having a really good conversation about what was happening, what was impacting on it. And the interesting thing is, since then the participation's actually picked up. So the intervention I did was actually face-to-face intervention. In the master's course I teach, some of my students actually teach and learn as well, so they have their own teaching sites. Now these are teachers that are primary teachers, secondary teachers, and they are learning about teaching in an online environment. So they have the ability in the course to have their own teaching site, and they've just started teaching this week. So what I've been able to do with that group is introduce them to the LearnTrak data as a way to enable them to actually look at what's happening in terms of their course, in terms of the content and participation. Now they do a second teaching iteration in the second half of the year, which is much longer. So I'm hoping that by introducing it at this point, they'll see the benefits, and because it's data, so in the end they are going to have to learn, well, what can you take from the data, what can you actually draw from it. But when they do the second iteration, they'll be much more aware. The other thing I was able to do is actually, for the students that are not using the Learn site, is talk about any diagnostic tools that may be available in the LMS that they're using. I think all of the help with the interface is superb, and when I first went in I spent a little bit of time browsing, and I suppose at that point I tried to work out which of the views was useful for me. But I did go to the help material, and that was really handy as well. Just glad it's there, wish it had been there quite a few years ago. We'll be really interested to see how it develops. I think it's something that staff need to know about. As we've got new staff moving into an online environment, one of the common issues is that they can feel that they're drowning in terms of trying to keep a handle on everything, trying to measure everything and trying to check everything. And so as their understandings deepen in terms of what their roles are within those environments, or not in those environments, and think very carefully about if they're assessing within that environment what it is they're assessing, then to me, having a tool like this, it has more value, but they also need to understand what it can do and what it can't. And so, yeah, I just think it's great. I really, really do.